This is Andy Gutierrez from StarWars.com, and you are listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z. This is the podcast you're looking for.
This is James Arnold Taylor, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi. I have a good feeling about this.
Joining us today for a cup of coffee to talk about the 20th chapter, Chapter 20, the 4th episode in Season 3 of The Mandalorian, our two returning guests. First, you heard him, or will hear him this week, depending on when I release this, on Coffee with Kenobi, talking about The Bad Batch with my son Mason. Greg Cass. Greg, welcome back to the show.
Oh, it's so great to have taken a long break and done this on an entirely different day. Wink,
yes.
Wink.
Wink, wink. Completely different clothes, outlook, everything. Yeah, it's great to have you back, bud.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. To be joined by a legend and just a real role model, and it's good to see you as well, Dan.
See that I've heard. Well, also joining us, speaking of legends, as the Greg alluded to, one of the teachers in the dungeon. That's a long story. Mr. Tom Gross.
Well, hello, everybody. Good to be here. Good to be here with you, Greg and Dan, talking about The Mandalorian.
That's my favorite song. Very good. Well, let's start with our one word to describe the episode. At the time of this, I'm not sure what I'm going to say. That's why I'm going to ask Tom to go first.
Oh,
one word and overall thoughts.
I'd be happy to. So, my one word is acclamation. And so, thoughts on this. Let's see. Monsters, check. A little bit of backstory and history, check. Some culture, check. I don't know, you guys. This, my initial reaction to this after seeing it was I just was excited about all of the stuff that we learned. It's a deep look into the Mandalorian culture. We get more and more every time we get together with the armorer and crew. This one has high action and a rescue. I mean, I'm trying to think, what more would I want in a good adventure?
Interesting. You've got me going a lot of places with this. So while I'm continuing to marinate and my coffee is warming up, let's have Greg share his one word.
Yeah. So my one word is resilience. And I think to best summarize my feelings on this episode, I slept in this morning, so didn't get to do my pre-commute viewing. So I was watching this alone in my office while students were not visiting me for office hours. And I shouted for joy at one point in a way that made the math department down the hall kind of poke their heads out and be like, is writing okay? Are they okay down there? But, I think there's one incredible reveal in this that just filled me with such joy that I could have easily picked best for my word, but I like resilience because I think we see across these plot lines, we see the young Foundling Ragnar be resilient in the face of some doom. We see Bo-Katan being resilient in her new life, that acclamation that Tom referenced, and more than anything, the real life resilience of Ahmed Best and the way he has maintained a position in this fandom despite experiencing some really awful things, I just think is absolutely astounding and beautiful. So I'm so happy with that gift they gave us today.
Yes, that we're gonna hit that for sure, because that was a spectacular, breathtaking moment. My word is hyphenated, of course, and it is half full. So a positive person looks at things as half full. A cynical person looks at things as half empty, and a Cubs fan is waiting for the cup to spill. And that's which Tom and I can really relate to. Are you a Red Sox guy, Greg?
I am, so I have no idea what you're talking about. We definitely don't have those feelings up here.
Yeah, of course not. Oh, it looks like the sarcasm light is working really well.
There it goes.
We installed it. No, I love the episode, and I watched it twice today. Some great stuff, some great action. The middle sequence is for the ages. But then I sit back and I ask myself the question I've been asking myself a lot during this season, which I'm sure we will explore as time goes on. So at the beginning of this, we see this great training sequence between Mandalorians, and then a really fun sequence with Grogu where he is a challenger, or he challenged. He challenges someone as part of his Mandalorian training or his evolution to go from a foundling to an apprentice. I don't think we ever heard the term apprentice used. Certainly in Star Wars we have, but not when it comes to Mandalorians themselves. Tom, what stands out to you about this opening sequence with the training montage?
First of all, I like the fact that
montage, but yeah.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. It does move fast, and they go through a lot of stuff. My thing was, man, they're standing awful close to each other with all of this physical activity. Someone's going to get hurt. But I did like that, these guys do train, and guys and women, they do train. And here we get to see what that looks like. So the thing that stands out to me when Din Djarin puts Grogu down in front of the other foundling who had just received his helmet, first of all, I had some of the feelings that I think Bo-Katan was feeling, like, are you really going to do this? And everyone else is like, he's too small. I was like, yeah, I mean, I know he can use the Force, but let's get serious here. But what really stood out to me as a father is each time Grogu would look over his shoulder with like some sort of an approving or curious sort of look, wanting some acceptance or guidance or something from Din Djarin. And each one happens, and it takes Din to come down and say, it's okay. Use what you've learned. It's okay. And then, of course, we get to see Grogu use a little bit of his training to completely surprise the other foundling and win the award. But I really liked that as a couple things. I said acclimate. Grogu is beginning to acclimate into this Mandalorian culture, which we get to see a little bit later, even more. But then, so we have that, but we also have this father-child kind of sequence as well.
Greg, what worked for you about this intro, or did it work for you?
Yeah, it's funny. The first viewing, I also snuck in too. I did watch it at home on the big screen once I got out of my office. I think the first time I watched it, what struck me most is the community aspect of it, right? Is that they are all kind of connected to each other, and this is clearly a shared part of their identity. And it's kind of inspiring, and I still have a kind of wary eye on Bo-Katan, and when she's walking around and seeing all this, it felt like she was really appreciative of how much community there was. And then the second time I watched it, it really struck out to me that, yes, there is this community building aspect to it, but it also in some ways feels kind of dark and troubling that it is violence and fighting that is at the core of their community. And, not to get too real world, but it's like the closest visual I could think of is some of those old videos Al Qaeda used to put out of terrorists doing
on the
tire
monkey
jumps.
Bars. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And it's like, it certainly doesn't have that exact same tone at all, but it is like, well, what does it mean when you build your community around the fact that you're fighting? And Bo-Katan's line from a couple episodes ago stood out to me where she said, the Empire could wipe us out because we spent all our time weakening each other and pitting ourselves against each other. So I think both of those are in tension there in a productive way, that it's like, yeah, this is a community growing together, but they have this kind of core that's not going to stand up necessarily to an outside threat of some kind.
What I like that a lot. What I like is that even though they're training and it's the physical part, the first I thought, was this all they emphasize? Is this it? But the way that they treat one another and the fact that they're being aggressive, but they're not aggressive. Like they're fighting. They're using knives. They're using fire, shooting fire at one another. They think that's a good idea. Which that's kind of interesting, but there's no like hostility. Now we have seen that with Paz Vizsla in season 1 and a little bit in the Book of Boba Fett when he challenges Din Djarin, but Paz Vizsla is interesting because he becomes a little more interesting. I mean, up to this episode, To me, it was just a big, tall Mandalorian. I mean, it just didn't really do anything for me. The training was fine. It was a cool idea. But when they're shooting, continually blasting the water, I thought, well, this is kind of stupid. I mean, what are we doing? I mean, if you listen to last week's show, I was pretty critical of my thoughts on the narratives of where they went with Dr. Pershing and things like that. I mean, I understood it. It didn't necessarily work for me. This does work for me. But I think there's a lot of symbolism here. For one thing, again, the water stuff is just this whole season. The Mandalorian season 3 should be entitled Water World, because they're blasting at this agent of change and purification and survival. And so I might be stretching that a little too much, but again, we'll wait and see, because the question really becomes, are we learning, just as Bo-Katan is learning, that the way isn't this radical, crazy concept at all, but actually a really foundational, good way to live in this galaxy? Or is their growth so stilted that they can't see the forest for the trees, and then the helmets become something that's actually blinding them to how the world really actually functions? Once we figure that out, then I'll know if they're blasting at water is them symbolically stifling their own growth and change and purification, or if it's really because they're sick of shooting at rocks. I don't know. Or maybe it's to scare away. But then we go to the thing with Grogu and the rocks, and we haven't really talked about that very much. Or the wonderful sequence when he does that challenging thing. I mean, I love that. I mean, I'm sure everyone loved that. And like you mentioned, Tom, he very much is looking at Din Djarin because he's still got that core belief. It reminds me of like a pet that's been treated poorly by its initial owner, and then eventually escapes that and it goes to a healthy, happy family that loves the dog or the cat or whatever. But when he looks up and, it's okay to use your abilities, and Grogu actually does and completely dominates in this fight sequence, which is a great thing. It reminded me again of the fact that this isn't just this adorable little green puppet, but someone with like real trauma who is reliving being a child and also being asked to be so much more than what he actually is doing. I think it's really, really rich. And I think it's symbolized with him and these rocks that are actually more than rocks. Now, that's a lot of information there, but what do you guys think?
Oh, yeah, lots to think about. Let me I was deep into thought when you tossed that this way. So
while you're marinating, I want to see what Greg thinks about Grogu and the rocks.
Fair enough.
Sure. I loved that sequence just as a bit of Star Wars whimsy, that you think he's moving the rocks and then they're revealed to be little creatures. And so, I think it is a very George Lucas touch to have those little vignettes and silliness.
Yes.
I think of is it the wart outside of Jabba's palace that, tongues the little critter? And, there's no reason for that to be there, but we all love Return of the Jedi because it's there, and things like that are sprinkled throughout. And then at the end of that sequence, the fact that all the rocks stand up and crawl away is first just a great gag. It was very silly and, got a good chuckle out of me. But then we keep seeing that, if Grogu were in one of these Star Wars video games that have come out over the years, you would have to pick which power set he was in. And he definitely has the creature handling power set, right? That is not necessarily at the front of every Jedi. I know we know Ezra from Rebels was very strong in that regard. Anakin uses it in Attack of the Clones in the arena to calm down the reek. And we keep seeing over time that he draws creatures to him. He calms the Rancor in Book of Boba Fett. And so just because we are in this larger kind of creature season as well, yes, I was going to make the joke that it's Mandalorian, The Way of Water, but they took that title already. So they couldn't go with that for years. But there's also a lot of creatures this season. And the fact that we're seemingly leading up to somebody riding the mythosaur, and to all you just said about how powerful and complex this little guy is, I wouldn't count him out as a candidate for who rides and tames the mythosaur and helps unite the people of Mandalore, just because of these hints we get about that.
Plus, the thing with the rocks and the animal connection, which is a very limited force ability, I love that because I'm sure to the onlooker, especially the other Mandalorians, Grogu is not much more than a rock. You know, he's just a cute little guy. He's young, doesn't appear to be extraordinarily mobile. He's not he's not audible per se, besides some coos and some wonderful little sound effects. But the fact that he sees that these rocks are actually living sentient beings and he's enjoying being with them, he's kind of playing with them. But there's so much more there's more underneath the surface of the rocks, and there's much more under the surface of Grogu. And I really thought that was just so beautiful. I mean, it's a cute little, like you said, it's a cute little play with scene to just kind of make us just go, "Oh, Grogu's the best." But he is the best, and I like how smart that sequence is.
I like that we're having this conversation in this episode because Grogu was largely absent from the last episode. And so to take the conversation to the other point you were making, Dan, is Din Djarin comes and takes him from this sweet scene where he's being who he is and takes him over to the training. And so I think what I take from the training scene is that and Greg, I totally go to your point on like this violence. It's like a culture of violence. I guess where I go with that is this is a culture that is in a survival mode. They've lost their planet. They're split, and they're trying to find a way to survive and bring things back. So I do wonder, will they continue if they were to get a foothold somewhere, if they do something to liberate a portion of Mandalore, will they continue this sort of behavior? I suppose, there was also part of the creed in this that was mentioned that kind of puts that foundling in his place. One does not speak if one does not know.
One does not speak unless one knows. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I missed that a little bit, but I was pretty close. So I don't know. I like those little tidbits that give us a little bit more information on these Mandalorians.
So I'm glad you brought up one does not speak unless one knows. The first time I watched it, I thought, what? This just sounds like pedantic gibberish. But then as I looked at it a second time, it hit me how interesting and insightful that actually is. Greg, what do you make of one does not speak unless one knows?
I really like it, and as people who watch me on social media know, I got really obsessed with Rian Johnson's new movie, the Glass Onion movie, and there's a great line that Benoit Blanc delivers on that that says, "Do not confuse speaking." Now I'm going to mess it up, but it's essentially don't speak without thought and assume that means you're brave, essentially. And it had a very similar resonance here, where it's like, when we think about, the act of speaking, I mean, look at what line of work we're all in and including right at this moment, like, talk is cheap, to use the cliche, and it feels so easy. But when you actually think through what you're saying, that's when talk means something, and when talk inspires or represents something larger than that. And so I think you're right. There's the literal truth of Grogu can't make an oath because he can't yet speak he can't form those words, although he seems to be getting closer. But then the idea that, if you're not actually thinking about what you're saying, then you should also not be speaking, which I do think is the kind of pushback at I keep forgetting his name, Ragnar, the other foundling.
And I love the idea too. It's a great archetype. The notion that, have your yes be yes and your no mean no. It's a great Christian metaphor too. And the idea that your words have weight. Mandalorians, in other words, you're not going to be braggadocious. You're not going to carry yourself in any way except with, speak silently and carry a big stick. I think that is absolutely a truity when it comes to a Mandalorian and the Mandalorian culture, at least as a child of the Watch or child of the Way. So I found that to be pretty neat once it actually made sense. And then when I kept thinking about what it meant, and I watched it a second time, Din's basically saying, if we say something, we know. We're not being flippant. We're not trying to self-actualize through language is actually something that's going to happen. But then, do you guys want to say anything about the training dart sequence? Besides the fact that it was awesome.
It was great.
It was really a lot of fun. When Tom started talking about this scene, he mentioned just the way Grogu looks at Din, and the way you worded it was about performance, and that's how I felt it. But to remember that there are puppeteers behind that is still just incredible, and that the way they're able to do that and make it come to life. Now, if I'm being critical, I think we got to work on the jumping just a little, because that still sometimes looks like a doll being tossed in the air or something. But the facial expressions are so beautifully done in that scene. And, you know, anybody who's a parent knows, or just spends time with kids, knows that look of the, I'm not sure I'm supposed to. And it was really, really a nice bit of puppeteering, and I appreciated it.
Absolutely. So then a dragon type thing shows up, which is great because Tom just saw the new Dungeons and Dragons movie. We found out it's a raptor. They won't use blasters because it will kill the child. There's a lot going on with this sequence, and it's exciting. You know, they have to muster up a hunting party and go after him. The nest is high. I love the sequence on Bo-Katan's ship just blasts. They're slowing down with their jetpacks. Also, she goes and scouts everything out. She starts to really assert herself as a leader with this group. But I'm much more interested, and I have a feeling that you two are as well, with what happens when Grogu walks off the armor and goes into the forge.
Go ahead, acclamation. The thing you said there, I do want to mention one shot of that chase of the raptor to its nest is right before they pop to the Mandalorian title screen, is that beautiful dark red sun and her ship just sort of like easing in. You can kind of see the exhaust, and it left me feeling a little uneasy. And then you go, boom, Mandalorian. Yeah. Okay. You are not ready to go yet, or something like that. I'm not exactly sure what she says to, what the armorer says to Grogu. She says,
too young to join them, but there's still much work to attend to.
Yes. And so Grogu doesn't get to go, and enters the forge with the armorer. Now, Grogu has been to the forge prior, but this is the first time by himself. And you watch it happen. You're like, oh, good. You know, you rub your hands together and you say, a lesson is coming. And look at it. We had a little training outside with darts and Ragnar, and now we're gonna get some intelligent training here with the leader. So she says, so she's making this chest plate that eventually comes to chest plate, and we know she's making these comments to him. And what I loved is she says, the forge can reveal weakness, discussing the metal and all of that. But then we instantly the sparks take Grogu to a flashback and to a great, great weakness that Grogu has, experienced. And so I love that play of words. I love that moment, because I really felt like, first of all, let's just talk about the escape from the clones in Order 66. What a harrowing, amazing.
Can we stop? Can I pause there for a quick second?
Yeah.
I want to say something.
Want me to go there?
No, I do, but I just want to say something about what you said earlier that I really liked. You said about the forge and the lesson that was coming. Because up until this episode, when I saw, when you watch the armorer, because she hasn't been in a ton until this season, really, when the Mando has his flashbacks, I thought it was just a perfect happenstance and a good piece of narrative storytelling when the clanging of the metal together reminds him of these explosions when he was a child before he was a foundling, and it all just sort of worked together. But then when she says, this forge is the heart of Mandalorian culture. She says, as we shape steel, we shape ourselves as raw ore and refine ourselves through trials and adversity, because the forge can reveal weakness. And then I had got these goosebumps. I thought, oh my gosh, this is meditative for her. Why is she so stoic and wise and serene? Because she is always forging herself. She is always refining herself through whatever trials and adversity she has faced. We do not know. We know that she was witness to the eradication of people. That would do it. That would absolutely do it. But then when I dialed in and realized, well, this is Grogu. He's gonna share with us. We're gonna learn about him. So Tom, yeah, definitely continue. I mean, interrupt you, but I just thought that little piece there was just so beautiful, so beautiful.
I'm so glad you stopped me because I missed that. The benefit of a second viewing, let me just say. But that is marvelous. I love all that. But so we go to this flashback that is just amazing. I don't know who that Jedi is that he takes the elevator down. Do we know who that? Do we know the Jedi? I know who that Jedi is. No, but do we know that
Jedi? So it's Kelleran Beck, who we have seen in Star Wars. It's of course the actress Ahmed Best.
Oh, yeah, I knew that. Yes.
But Kelleran Beck was, when they had that game show on Star Wars YouTube during the pandemic, he was the host. Kelleran Beck, Ahmed Best as Kelleran Beck was the host of that Jedi
Temple Challenge.
The Jedi Temple Challenge. It was him, and they always talk about he's a Jedi master that trains younglings, and they just talked about it. And he had his own little droid, and the show was, pretty much had the same stuff every episode and didn't last very long. But he was a great character, and he was on Coffee with Kenobi, and he talked about establishing the name Kelleran Beck and the fighting style. It's a great episode. I definitely encourage you to listen to. But he's such a smart, insightful man. And when I saw it, I said to Mason, "It's Kelleran Beck." Now, was it the level of the Luke Skywalker reveal? No, but wow, what an awesome reveal! That was absolutely magnificent.
Greg, I'm assuming this is that moment.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, go ahead. I'd like to hear that.
Well, so there is one of the Jedi in the upper hall says, get him to Kelleran. And when they said that, I had that kind of moment of recognition. I'm like, Kelleran, I know Kelleran. What? And
is this another moon or something? Yeah.
Is this a council member?
Seriously.
And so, and that is, as you were talking about, Tom, that is a harrowing scene. And, this is the second time we've seen Order 66 I guess that was technically last year in live action, but within the last year or so. And so, it's very harrowing and upsetting. And so when the doors open to just a grand hero shot of, and yes, Kelleran Beck meant a lot to my son and I. That show hit in the middle of the pandemic, and it was something we bonded over. And I'm not an expert on the behind the scenes, but as I understood it, it was supposed to be a Disney Plus show. And they said, no, kids need something right now. Let's get it out for free on YouTube and lighten up kids' lives and have it be a little gift. And that's at least however I always took it with my son. And he watched every episode 4 times. I told him Kelleran Beck was on Mando. He said, I want to watch that. I'm like, okay, I can put on Mando. He's like, no, I want to watch Jedi Temple Challenge again. So I have some more viewings in my future. But yes, it is just the fact. I mean, even if you don't know that, Tom, you obviously recognize it was Ahmed Best. And I think that still has that powerful meaning to you because we do know what he went through at the hands of a lot of awful people on the internet over time and what he had to face. And so to let him come back, but also get to be the coolest, kind of toughest Jedi around, it really, again, alone in my office, it was a fist pump shout. And then it was just sitting there being so joyous and so cheerful about the fact, I'm tearing up thinking about what that man went through. And that Lucasfilm, I understand people have their flaws in it and they think they could do better by some people. Absolutely. But when they get the chance to do right by somebody and to fix something, they do it. And this was such a gift to Ahmed Best and a gift to us to get to celebrate that. I'm getting emotional just talking about it again. So I'll stop there, but it was really a wonderful moment.
This is Vanessa Marshall, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
You'll get no argument from me. I thought it was everything you said. You completely nailed it, as always, Greg. It's so cool to see such a good man get a chance to be. I mean, how long have we been saying, who's the Jedi that helps? Who's the one who rescues him from the Jedi Temple? And to have the hero shot like that, the cinematography, we're looking up at him just as Grogu is looking up at his rescuer. And the way he fights with grabbing the extra lightsaber and the harrowing escape, and even having a bit of pithy humor a little bit there too. And then to see the people from Naboo being a part of the rescue and, kind of where that all happens from was just magnificent. Like you said, when they hit home runs, you don't see the ball land.
So just to finish my thought on all of that is so Grogu is going through this, and I felt like it was, the armor says this reveals weaknesses. And so here is everything we wanted to know, but Grogu also has to acknowledge it and where he has been. And he cannot do that before he moves on to his next life as a Mandalorian. And so I felt like this is such a pivotal moment for Grogu. Again, the acclamation word that I talk about, it's his way of making his way into the Mandalorian culture.
That's great. That's great. If you don't know your past, you don't know your future. And is there anything, just when you thought Grogu couldn't be any cuter, we get a smaller sized puppet of a baby Grogu. Are you kidding me?
A whole new line of merch, and I don't even say that cynically. I'll buy it all.
No, that's exactly what I thought. Well, okay, I know what we're going to be doing. Yeah. Then once that is done, the puppetry is spectacular. The facial expressions that Grogu has and the emotion that is communicated through this child is absolutely stunning. Absolutely stunning. Then we get to the rescue. I mean, there's certainly plenty I've noticed that I liked, and I'd love to hear what you both think. I love the fact that there are 7 Mandalorians. 7 is a great number in literature and mythology. I really like this sequence with eating, but let's just talk about the rescue. Greg, I'll let you start. What kind of jumped out for you, or what do you want to talk about?
Yeah, it was true that the whole backstory flashback was so exciting. It's like I forgot we still had a delicious meal to have. That was the appetizer to the main course here. And so returning to that, I agree that the forming of the 7 in the warring party was really exciting. And
yes,
I was struck by how immediately Bo was accepted as a leader. When Bo came up between Mando and the armorer in Book of Boba Fett, she was very dismissive of Bo, and Bo was a weak leader, and she was flawed, and she had taken the darksaber under false pretenses, so she wasn't able to be successful. And so the fact that was all washed away in the baptism, and the whole clan seems to really embrace that and just accept her for who she is and judge her by her skills. And, she had the plan to chase the raptor in the ship. She did the mapping, and so she got to be the leader of this party. And it was like a little mini. Well, I'm talking with one of the teachers in the dungeon, so it was like a little D&D party. It was like a little raiding party to head out on our adventure and pick different roles. And there were definitely a few things thrown in their way, which at least my DM would do to slow us down and not make it as easy as we thought.
Well, certainly that sitting around the fire and sort of planning what's coming. One thing that I noted is when they were talking about the height of that cliff, that Paz questioned, well, that's just too high. And Bo-Katan mentions an experience of climbing cliffs like that, on Mandalore. I caught that connection that she's using an experience of Mandalore to sort of bring that leadership skill to them that, hey, we can do this. Again, getting more information about how the Mandalorians do manage this helmet. Bo turns to Din. How do you eat? Oh, we all go off to, secret places and we eat, blah, blah, blah. And I can't even tell you, the goosebumps came on my arm when Paz Vizsla says, you're the leader of this. You have the honor of being at the fire. Wow. That is so cool. I love that. I want to be the one sitting at the fire.
I like that they're all sort of, it kind of makes you rethink the whole alpha thing, because at least I was under the impression, and I think the way Boba Fett was marketed for 30 plus years, that Fett is like the alpha of the alphas. Unless he runs in the Sarlacc pit, he is the toughest guy in the room. But with this, there's like such grace and dignity and incredible humility to, this is your plan. You have the honor of standing next to the fire. This is the way. But he's not bossy. It's more like, we respect and revere you so much. So here you go. And she doesn't resist it. The way that Bo-Katan is having to look in the mirror, but in a very different way. Like, I think she's kind of learning to love herself because she's defined herself through being the leader of Mandalore. And she based it all on the myth of redemptive violence and holding the Darksaber. But in this, she's saving people. She's standing up for people. She is not losing her temper. She's not overly aggressive. She takes charge, but not at the expense of someone else. And some of that is just because of how the Mandalorians carry themselves and the way the armor has kind of created this unorthodox familial atmosphere. But it's really, really great. And Din very much is sort of a side character in this whole episode, which I'm fine with. How do you eat? And I was thinking, how are they going to eat? And you go off and find a place and remove your helmet. So there you go. Truth be told, and this is a bit of a side thing, but when they were first sitting around the campfire, I couldn't help but think of Blazing Saddles, but that's a story for another time.
I did want to mention, when you say Din sort of fades into this, that was another reason for my word acclamation, because he's becoming one. This is the way. He's becoming one of them. There were times I wasn't sure that he was there or because he was just blending in. So I'm glad you said that.
Yes.
Yeah, and that applies in the action to come. There were times I'm like, was that Din? Which one was that? Because they do all appear so similar. I think Bo-Katan still stands out a little bit just because her mask design is so different. But I just wanted to celebrate with your comments. The Star Wars fire scene is becoming more common, right? There's one in Solo, and there was one in the first season of Mandalorian. And you know, in good Western storytelling, that's where the character beats happen between the action showdowns, right?
Yes.
And I think we're right to kind of think of this as Bo looking into herself and trying to understand. So I agree with what you said, Dan. I'm going to word it slightly differently, which is I think Bo-Katan has always sought power, but now she's understanding what it is to be a leader. That it's not just wielding power and getting to call the shots. It's actually being of the people and of the community. And I think I'm going to steal Tom's word again. That's her acclimating to this new community and this new culture. And if, we are going to see the gathering of the Mandalore people, that's what's going to empower it more than any kind of martial force or a weapon in your hand.
Yes. It's not about being the one in charge. It's about being one of the many. And being together. Absolutely. So then it's morning. They have to use stealth. They can't use firepower to go up this peak. They spent a lot of time climbing up the side of this ridge. I thought for sure somebody was going to wipe out. I thought for sure we're going to lose somebody. But they did their great Spider-Man impressions and got up there. And that's when we suddenly Paz Vizsla becomes more than just a recognizable character. I must admit, for a moment, I thought, well, how silly. They're climbing up this thing, and he's got this massive weapon that must weigh over 200 pounds, and he's climbing up the mountain with it, but, whatever.
There was lots of grunting.
Absolutely. Then we find out that that is Paz Vizsla's son, and when I watched it a second time, I was really watching Paz Vizsla's, like, the way he carried himself, and I tried to listen for his vocal inflections to see if he showed a little bit more emotion than you would expect, but he really doesn't. And I think that's part of the Zen nature. And I think you can really tell what kind of father he is because they very much live the way. But then at the end of this, the great thing is he runs up and they hug. They have this massive, massive affectionate hug. You don't see Mandalorians being overly affectionate. So I really enjoyed and appreciated that.
Well, it is hard to give a kiss on the cheek when you're a Mandalorian, I suppose. I did want to say of the climb, I think they needed the Phantom Menace ascension guns, right? They needed the automatic kind of lift us up instead of the rappelling. But to the main point there, I think it was a surprise that Paz has a son, and I wonder about the meaning of that word because I think Din Djarin would call Grogu his son, rightfully, and so I do wonder: is this a biological son or is this a foundling who he has taken on? I think there's still something interesting to learn there about how this culture works. And it is funny to me that it is Jon Favreau still doing Paz's voice, and it's almost like they're garbling it a little bit more. It was like people complained it was too obvious, so they try to hide it a little bit more. But there is some nice performance there still of he does care about this son, and he does make this kind of irrational choice, and then justifies it as but I'm motivated more than you are at this particular moment. So it all works generally, even if it's kind of clunky in some moments for me.
Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are, with Dan Z, the podcast you're looking for. This is...
Right. Yeah. The effects are nice. The rescue is fun. It's exciting, and then we meet these baby raptors, which we find out are going to be new foundlings. And then at the very, very end, when she lost her pauldron, I thought, well, they're totally going to replace hers. I mean, I think that was a cool little thing to do, but we kind of saw it coming. But then she does real quick, and I know our coffee's running low, so we know we need to wrap up. But she says to the armorer, what would you say if I told you I saw one? And the armorer says, saw what? It says, a mythosaur. Says, you're very lucky. It is a noble vision. When you choose to walk the way of the Mandalore, you will see many things. And then Bo-Katan says, but it was real. And she says, this is the way. Gentlemen, what do we make of that conversation? Tom, why don't we start with you?
Yeah. Wow. I love that we saw Grogu in the Forge earlier, and now here is Bo-Katan. I love that sort of comparison and purpose. What I was trying to figure out is the armorer toying with her through all of this? Like, does she know? And so I just was trying to figure out who was in control here, who had the knowledge. And I'm not sure that I really know, except that the armorer always has a very timely, this is the way. We talked about when Din Djarin goes to, I forget the situation, but he was in the Forge and he challenges her. Wasn't it something like, I'm going to go and I'm going to bathe in the waters? And she goes, this is the way, with a little bit of attitude. And here it's a very firm, almost, I hate to say it, almost collegial, this is the way.
Huh. What do you think, Craig?
Yeah, I thought earlier when Dan, you were talking about how it's a meditative experience being in there, and then the fact that we get the two, like Tom just pointed out, really means to me that it is a ritual, right? That again, she says it's the heart of the Mandalore community, and this is where we go for all these things. And I think a lot of us have those spiritual places, if it's a literal church or a place in nature where we feel ourselves kind of speaking with a higher power of whatever kind. And so to recognize that we might not get to see what exactly is going on in Bo-Katan's head, but she must be experiencing something akin to that. It does feel like she's not looking back, she's looking forward in her experiences in a lot of ways. But it's really interesting to me that she chooses to tell the armorer after purposefully not telling Din. And last episode we were all I assume we were all desperate for Din to ask the follow-up questions, right? When she says, you didn't see anything alive down there, like, Din, aren't you a little curious why she's asking that? So I think it's really curious that she asks of the armor to try to still understand what this means and reveals it to her. I will say my read on this scene is that Bo did not get what she wanted. I think, she wanted some kind of confirmation, some kind of explanation of what this would mean. And the armorer is not giving her that. And you're right that the "this is the way" can mean so many things. This one felt to me like the classic "bless your heart," which really means end conversation, right? Like the "bless your heart," see ya. And so I felt like that was a little bit of dismissive. I'm not sure if maybe the armorer just doesn't believe her or thinks it has to have been a vision. It's so inconceivable that she could have seen the real thing. But because I'm on the show that asks more questions than it answers, I'll throw the question back, which is, why do you think she went to the armorer and not to Din?
Oh, I think it's because she's still processing. It's very, very fresh in her mind. And I think that she respects Din Djarin, but I think she sees the armorer as a peer. They're both female warriors who are in charge of this mighty band of collectives. And see, I think I have a bit of a different reading. I think she got exactly what she wanted, and it frightens her. I think we have never seen the armor being anything less than authentic. She may be a bit ambiguous in her explanations, but you always know where you stand with the armorer. She's very, very direct, and I think she's being direct here. I think she believes everything and she believes nothing. If Bo-Katan says this is what I saw, they're clearly setting Bo-Katan up for something. The fact that she was touched in such a way that she has continued to keep her helmet on, and the fact that these things keep happening, and then she just feels drawn to this pauldron of a mythosaur. And then I don't know. Will we find out if it was a vision or not? I don't know. I mean, my guess is that it is real. And I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. It's always been a legend. Maybe the armor doesn't actually know there's one that exists. And then the legend perpetuates because of a lot of other things. Maybe they're mystical, and maybe there's physical, and maybe they're all the above, like the Force, by the way. So I think this is a wonderful wrinkle for a really fantastic show. And I said earlier, I'm half full. The only reason I'm half full on this episode is because I'm still not 100% convinced, and we're almost halfway through the season, of what the purpose of this season is. Right? Where was the man? I mean, the literary snob in me wants to say the story was complete after season 2. I love this. I love waking up. I love the traditions of it. I love talking about it with my friends and hearing what everybody in the Star Wars community thinks about it. And it is adding some interesting layers. But is this an essential part of the Mandalorian stories, or just fun bonus? Is it just the gravy on this Thanksgiving leftovers sandwich?
I'll say, as a fan, I'm just enjoying sitting back
I'm
and
glad.
taking the ride.
Yes.
Taking the ride. I haven't even thought of it that way, but you make a good point there.
Yeah, and I'm enjoying it. I mean, part of the fun is, and Greg, you analyze and break things down all the time on your day job. That's part of the fun for me. But let's get our letter grades, and if you want to weigh in on that, feel free. And Greg, why don't you start?
Sure. Just to finish that conversation, I think part of what you're describing, Dan, I get hung up on the name The Mandalorian because it feels like this season it's no longer about The Mandalorian. And you both brought up how Din kind of fades to the back. If you change that title to The Mandalorians, plural, I feel like that's where we are now. And we're thinking a little more about, this larger world and all of that. So I loved this conversation. I loved the episode. It was, kind of 50% the part of my head that loves playing in canon and connecting things and drawing things together. And then the other 50% is just when you're in the backyard smashing your Kenner action figures together. Somebody borrowed a bat, maybe Mothra from a Godzilla set, but we still had fun in the backyard playing. So my grade is A for Ahmed. Absolutely. I had a great time with this, and it's my favorite of the season so far, even though I was very positive on last week, unlike other people in the room.
Right on. Tom.
So I'm going to say, for the connections, for the things that I said at the beginning, the culture, the story, the acclamation of all the things, but especially for that creature that made me jump when it flew over the cliff and came down and swooped down. I mean, come on. Star Wars monsters, and just the fact that they fought a monster there not too long ago. I feel like there's something to that as well, and I'm just wondering where we're going to get there. But anyway, for all those things, I give it a solid A.
And I will give it an A-. It was probably my favorite episode of the season too. It brought me tremendous joy, and it made me think, and it made me laugh, and the reveal in the middle of it was just absolutely breathtaking and fantastic for all the reasons that you talked about earlier, Greg. So I really liked it, but again, there's just that nagging part of me that it just has it on the back burner of my brain. But what isn't on the back burner of my brain is making sure that all of you are sure to follow Greg and Tom everywhere on social media and to hear their thoughts on Star Wars, Dungeons and Dragons, the Oscars, whatever these two talented individuals want to talk about. Greg, please let everybody know where they can find you and your Substack and all of the great work you're doing.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. It's great to see you both. I was realizing last time I saw Tom, even on a Zoom screen, was over pancakes at an IHOP in Anaheim. So warm celebration memories. I have a lot of envy seeing you spin up your plans for London, Dan. I won't be there, but celebration is always such a special time. So we'll see everybody in 2025, I guess, is the next one after that. So, but yes, thank you. People can find me. I'm primarily on Instagram these days, which is On Canon, EYEONCANON. And I also just purchased ioncanon.com, so spelled the same way, and that leads to my Substack and some of the writing I do, which tends to write about movies and Star Wars and stuff. So I'm going to try to be more active in stretching that part of my brain, because it is a joy to get to analyze and share these things we love in a deeper sense than a extemporaneous conversation. Fantastic. As enjoyable as they are.
Absolutely. And Tom, what about you?
Yes, well, I am on Twitter at Draftline, DRAFTLINE. You can find me on Teachers in the Dungeon, not on the Dungeon. That's like a change, like The Mandalorian and The Mandalorians,
right.
something like that.
Yeah.
But I'm Teachers in the Dungeon. That's our podcast for Dungeons and Dragons. You can catch that on Twitter at Dungeon Teachers, and then on Facebook and Instagram, Teachers in the Dungeon. Thanks for having me on, Dan.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.
There's no one here. Move along.